ready to take your street photography to the next level with some unconventional street photography techniques. Let's get into it. It's time to shake things up and explore unconventional composition techniques that will increase your street photography composition technique repertoire. In this video, we'll dive into some unique ways to frame your subjects and create compelling street photos that will add depth, create meaning, and ultimately make your photos stand out from the crowd. Let's jump straight in. First on our list is obstruction. Yes, you heard that right. Shoot through or around objects like windows, fences, or foliage to partially obscure your subject. This technique adds layers of depth to your images that will create intrigue in your photos, making viewers curious to see what's beyond the obstruction. From my own experience, you would think that this technique is difficult to do, but it's actually one of the easiest on the list that I'm sharing with you today, because it's a simple case of shooting through shop windows, metal grates or railings, basically anything that partially obscures the subject. Market stalls are great for this technique because the hanging clothes acts as a barrier to the subject. Window displays can also be abundant with interesting artifacts and products. And as you can see, it really does add to the layering effect. Plus you can include reflections in the composition, which we're going to get into later. Where this technique is concerned and how I put it into practice, some shots are obviously more complex than others, but I'm hoping I can show you how easy this obstruction technique is to actually get into. Practice the easy shots of just firing the camera through a window, and then gradually work your way up to more complex compositions. Shooting through foliage or past objects to capture the subject all add to the layering effect of obstruction and make the shots more inherently interesting than just shooting a simple street portrait. For my own technique, I found myself using a narrow aperture of around f8 to f14 so that I could get the required depth of field that I was after. Of course, instead, you can choose to creatively blur the foreground objects whilst leaving your subject sharp in the background, and you can do this by selecting the focus point and latching it onto the subject who is behind the obstructions, while shooting in a wide enough aperture that will blur whatever isn't in the camera's plane of focus. Unfortunately for me, it's something I cannot physically do because of my disability, so I simply just adjust the aperture to give the shots a greater depth of field. Let's embrace the power of negative space. Those empty areas of your composition can be just as impactful as the subject. Use them to create a minimalist vibe or to emphasize your subject by capturing them in a vast open area. Finding compositions where there's a lack of elements in the frame will instantly draw the viewer's eye to the subject and make your photos memorable. It's all about finding the right balance and letting the space speak for itself. For this composition technique, being on a beach really does help because people are just sitting down facing the sea whilst reflecting on things. While it can be challenging to find minimalistic scenes in the city, with practice and a keen eye, you can learn to spot opportunities to place your subject on one segment of the rule of thirds or towards the edges of the frame, even in busy urban environments. As you can see, you can also do this technique when the subject is a man-made object that stretches out into the sea. It doesn't have to be people. Now this was an interesting one for me to do because I've never actively thought about the concept of juxtaposition in street photography, even though I've probably taken photos that fall under the juxtaposition umbrella. For this technique, seek out contrasting elements such as old and new, natural and artificial, or chaos and order, and place them side by side in your frame. This can also include things that aren't necessarily juxtaposed, but they simply fit together, such as the luck I had photographing this cool singer-guitarist who was playing directly opposite a guitar shop. Finding moments like this creates a deeper resonance to your photos, thus in some cases creates thought-provoking images that challenge the viewer's perceptions and makes them ponder the deeper meaning behind the scenes. In this image, I thought it was interesting how in this reflection I caught this guy doing irregular tasks such as painting whilst he was surrounded by all of these names of movies and TV shows that had elements of extreme fantasy and heroics. That's not to say that this guy isn't a hero, but I really just found the contrast quite thought-provoking. Juxtaposition can also be as easy as finding man-made objects next to nature, but I found that after reflecting on these shots, for myself the most interesting forms of juxtaposition in photography fall into slightly absurd comedy, such as the back of this statue of a cow that was on the pier contrasted with the couple that were walking behind it, and these two gents standing outside the gents, or the perspective that exaggerates the size of this fella's head in relation to Brighton Pier. Finding random signs or stickers hanging or attached to something and working them into a composition also can create a type of comedic interest that just wouldn't be there without them. Of course, juxtaposition can be as simple as finding contrasting shapes, colours, shops and even amusements that are supposed to be open when they are closed or completely empty. At first I was a bit daunted by this juxtaposition technique, and I actually thought it would be too taxing to achieve, but it turned out to be the most thought-provoking and fun task of the day. The juxtaposition on this shot is purely for myself. I came out of the bathroom that was situated on the beach, turned my camera back on, and noticed these three guys staring at me, wondering what I was doing. Usually it's people staring at me wondering what I'm doing, so it's ironic that these furry friends were clocking me instead. Now this extreme angle technique is pretty simple. It requires you to shoot from a low angle or up high, or from an unusual perspective. I found that the most interesting way of doing this is crouching down as low as I can and taking a shot whilst using the walkway as a leading line. But if you're more mobile than myself, take shots from unusual perspectives. You must forgive me, as for me, taking shots from a high angle was literally just me standing up on the promenade taking photos of people down on the seafront. Unfortunately, I am rather limited with how high I can physically place the camera. So the only thing that's extreme here is my disability and the fact that it extremely pisses me off. However, shooting from a low angle is obviously a lot easier for me. So for you, it's all there to experiment with. What's your favorite technique so far? Please let me know down below. And if you're getting something out of this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. It's always appreciated. Now let's explore the concept of reflective surfaces like glass or puddles to create visually appealing and balanced compositions. Now I spent most of the time shooting reflections through windows, and my camera technique for doing this that I hope you can use as well when trying this out for yourself is to angle the camera next to a shop window so that it displays an interesting reflection on the back of the LCD screen, and then simply wait for an interesting subject to walk into the frame. When I first learnt about this technique, I initially thought it looked very complex, but I actually found after I've practiced it quite a lot now, it's actually really easy. And I really hope that you can get out there and take some of these reflection shots as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how you look at it, there wasn't any rain, so I couldn't do any puddle reflections. But that's just another technique that you can try out if you enjoy the idea of shooting reflections. Just to give you guys some context for all of my settings that I use for shooting all of these techniques was to use auto ISO with minimum shutter speed, where I used from 100 to 3200 ISO and a minimum shutter speed of 1/50th of a second. And depending upon what I was shooting, I use an aperture of f3.2 all the way up to f14 in aperture priority mode, and I stayed in auto area autofocus in the center mode all day long, and the camera that I used was the Ricoh GRIIX. But if you want a deep dive into my daytime settings, then check out this card at the top here. This reflection technique overlaps with the obstruction technique that we looked at earlier, and it definitely overlaps with the final technique, which is frames, which we are going to look at right now. So let's talk about framing within a frame. You can use man-made or natural elements like doorways, arches, or windows to create a frame within your composition. This technique helps to draw the viewer's eye directly to the subject, making them the star of the show. So frames can be explicit or implicit and very subtle, yet no less effective. When I was taking a photo of that guitarist, this woman walked past, and you can see how she's inadvertently framing the guitarist, along with the guitar neck on the opposite side, which both help to draw the eye towards him. It's the same situation with this person, however in this shot, the actual composition is much more busy, yet the person here with the guitar neck on the opposite side also manages to somehow frame the guitarist in such a way that it draws the attention to him in the distance. In this shot that I discussed with you earlier on juxtaposition, the lettering and the Star Wars graphics on the right are subtly framing the painter in the middle. The abundance of colour surrounding this woman is framing her in her dark clothing, another form of juxtaposition with her plain jumper surrounded by all of that colour. These clothes on the rails are framing and also act as a leading line that leads to the subject who's walking towards the camera. In this photograph of this guy sitting and staring at Brighton Pavilion, the tree creates a nice frame on the edge, and also the branches hanging overhead act as another frame. This is a perfect example of a frame, as it's actually a frame that's framing the West Pier. And finally, in this shot, the overhanging dodgem structure and the little booth creates a nice dark frame for the subject in the distance. So as you can see, frames can be found everywhere, and all you have to do is use your photographic eye to seek them out and wait for the subject to enter the composition. So out of all of these techniques that we've discussed today, which is your favourite and what would you like to try out? Please let me know down below. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap with frames and reflections and juxtaposition and even extreme angles that you can work with when you hit the streets. So keep that in mind when you test out some of these techniques. And you don't have to love all of them. You don't even have to try all of them. Even if you just try out one single technique that resonates with you, it's still going to help you grow as a photographer. One major thing that I took away when practicing these techniques is that I spent so much time practicing them over and over again. I can now go out and use some of these compositional techniques without thinking. So it's become part of my street photography knowledge database that's stored in the old head up here. So the more that you try out these composition techniques, the more they'll become second nature to you and be part of your photography repertoire. And remember, don't be afraid to break the rules and experiment with these creative approaches. The key is to have fun and let your imagination run wild. However, if you want to learn how to master shutter speed for night street photography, then check out this video here. Until we meet again, go forth and create.